I would open the platform for questions, both from the audience and for the moderator, who is now Professor Sloan, who replaced Dr. Furman, who had to leave for another appointment. But Professor Sloan would address some early questions to the faculty. Elliot?
Yes, thank you, Yadin, and thank you for all of the presenters. Marvelous presentation on a complex and urgent topic that is near and dear to everybody. There are questions that have been posted already in the question and answer box, and they are not visible to those who have joined us on the Facebook Live or LinkedIn broadcast. So I'll bring them up again and ask for some comments. The first one is, is a vaccinated person able to still transmit the virus to other people? Marcus, you had commented on that. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So so there's a lot that we don't know about the vaccines right now. I mean, I think that some of the early data that's important to note is that I've seen estimates between about 33% to 52% efficacy in people who've only had one dose. So definitely people who are getting one dose, to assume that you couldn't catch COVID or transmit it to somebody else. You know, we still have to keep up with our social distancing and hygiene practices. So yeah, there's a lot that we still need to understand, because typically the trials are also looking at clinical infection symptoms and whether or not people have like subclinical, they'd be like DNA positive, asymptomatic. The trials aren't necessarily catching all of that, because you'd have to test people all the time to really catch that. So, I mean, there are still things that we're gonna have to try to understand a little bit better, and so we still have to be careful for a while.
Super, thanks. Would anyone else on the panel like to address that as well? Okay. Another question related to, it's an open question. The UK's decision to delay the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine to 12 weeks. Would folks like to comment on that and observations?
I'm happy to make observations, but I caveat them strongly with the fact that I am an engineer and not a pharmacist, not a vaccination expert. There are much cleverer people than me on the call. All I can do is parrot the arguments that are being rehearsed in the UK, which go a little bit like this, that ordinarily second doses of vaccines are given much later than 3 weeks. And the argument from the UK scientific officers who've taken the lead on this is that the reason 3 weeks has been used, and the evidence is all on 3 weeks because the clinical trials have all said 3 weeks. The reason that the evidence is on 3 weeks is because the trials did set it at 3 weeks, but the reason the trials set it at 3 weeks was because they wanted to have very fast trials. Perhaps if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and this vaccine, I'm only repeating an argument that the chief medical officer is making, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and these trials were going on for this particular vaccine, we might well have set a second dose at 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or perhaps even longer, and that historically vaccines often have 12 weeks or longer as their booster jab, and so there would be reason to believe that that would be efficacious. Though the UK scientific officer and chief medical officer both accept there is no evidence to support that argument. There is merely no evidence to counter it either. That evidence is being gained in the real world, of course. I received my first jab just before Christmas and have not received the second jab. So myself and a whole cohort of us are now first jabbed only, and I'm at about 8 weeks at the moment. So I guess there will be data of people who develop COVID or don't in that 12-week delay. So that real-world evidence will be being gathered as we speak.
All right, Dan, thank you. And also I'll point out that the US CDC has posted interim guidance on that topic, allowing extension of the second dose. They've also opined in writing that it is okay to swap vaccines. So if you have an mRNA vaccine of one brand, that you can take your second shot of another brand if that's what is available. You can find that by searching for CDC interim mRNA guidance. We have time for an additional question. We have so many questions here. for the panelists, do you see one of the questions either unanswered or open that you would particularly like to speak to? Otherwise, I will choose one more. All right, so I will raise the question of examples of success strategies to deal with vaccine hesitancy and fear. Would you folks offer some guidance on what is being done to address this nationally, internationally? I hear silence. I will note that in the chat box I've posted, one of our participants has posted a UNICEF document on addressing misinformation about vaccines, which perhaps is part of the question. And in our Hacking Coronavirus upcoming, there are some studies that are being done to address those questions. Yadin, you have indicated you'd like to bring the session to a close. So are there any topics that you would like to address before you do that?
Thank you, Elliot. Excellent assistant in engaging the faculty with the audience. Abigail Jones addressed the issue of public trust and building campaign to change minds and opinions. We will have the presentation recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation included in distribution to the audience in a short few days. It will be available. And in conclusion, I would like to join Elliot and Tom Judd to all the faculty for superbly well coverage of the topic they were assigned and the expertise they shared with us today. This is an evolving subject, and it helps for clinical engineers to understand today how can they get more involved and what are the challenges that technology can be used to help in bringing the immunization to a higher compliance and better level. This is an excellent opportunity to tell you that we just, with this webinar, opened the 2021 series, and we should encourage you to look for additional webinars on a monthly basis that will come up. On behalf of Elliot, Dr. Furman, and all the faculty, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much. I really appreciate everyone's participation and contribution. And Dean, I didn't jump in and interrupt you, but you said clinical engineers become more involved. We have never had anything more involving as clinical engineers than this pandemic. We have skin in the game with every family member, every friend, every country.
I agree.
Elliot, I was just thinking, you were saying rollout campaign. So I don't have data that it was successful, but I know some of the things we covered, though, were actually like app-based platforms to improve education, things like that. So that started to come into my head, but I'm like, I don't know if it's successful, but I know it's things that people are trying to do to improve rollout acceptance. So yeah, it's as far as knowing what definitely works is
I think there are different communities. The elder community has one set of issues. Minority communities have different sets of issues in terms of trust. There are issues in different countries with trust of the government. So I think this is we're all learning as we are flying the airplane, and many of us are stitching on parts of the wing and replacing parts of the avionics as we go.
Mark, isn't anybody making schools safe? I guess that's about teachers, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different thing too. Yeah, I mean, definitely with kids, and I mean, there just isn't a lot of data right now. They had trouble enrolling a lot of children, so in the mRNA trial. So But some of my colleagues are more into dissecting the trials than I am. I kind of try to look at the whole landscape more, and I have colleagues who are much better at really diving in and critiquing the trials. So
In the Washington Post today, the report is that the majority of the healthcare workers in Washington, D.C. have declined the vaccination.
mhm.
You know, I've told everybody who's declined it, send it our way down here in Florida. But
Yeah, yeah, there definitely has to be some reallocation there of figuring out where there's the backlog and sending it elsewhere. But
And you
yeah.
know, it then talked about the population segmentation in priority of receiving the vaccination. In Israel, they went through and got everybody lined up, including teachers. And I mention it because now they put the 11th and 12th grade pupils in priority because they want them to be able to take the matriculation exam.
Mhm.
And just think about how the country is thinking ahead. This is a good strategy.
That really is, and that's being hotly debated in the UK at the moment, because I'm sure other countries have all sorts of problems with lockdown as well. But we're in the middle of our huge second, third peak, and we're in a lockdown, and it's really, really impacting on school children because the schools are all closed and all sorts of mayhem are going on that, and yet nobody's yet put the teachers into that priority. If teachers were vaccinated, then the schools could be open, and it would just, you know, so put the teachers higher up. In terms of encouraging people to get the vaccine, I think the UK and Israel have a key advantage in that the vaccination program is being delivered by a national healthcare system, and in the UK certainly the national healthcare system is just held with such esteem and love by the general population. When they see nurses in the NHS getting and giving the vaccine, it convinces the population that it must be the right thing to do. So half the battle is won just by the fact that the NHS is delivering the vaccine program. And the difference couldn't be clearer with the track and trace testing, which was given to a private sector who made a, well, slightly less well a program, and people have no faith in track and trace and isolate because it's a private company that have difficulty. If they'd given that to the NHS, things might have been very different.
Well, we need to bring this to a close. Again, thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be part of this webinar, and Marcus and Dan, Elliot, Tom, and Callie Roy, thank you for all the help in the background.
thanks everybody. Have
Thanks
a
for having
great day.
us.
Have a safe week.
All right, thanks.
Yeah,
Be safe.
thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Callie Roy.